Part 2. Welcome to our daily story. Please give us an idea to get motivated if you listen. Don't forget to like and comment below. Nathan's story changes. A long moment of silence. Finally, Nathan looked up, his eyes looking straight at Megan. His voice was soft now, but heavy. Sometimes I feel stuck between what others expect and what I really want to do. There are days when I can't breathe because of all the responsibilities and pressures people put on me. I know life in America is sometimes a never-ending race. Everyone wants you to succeed, wants you to make money, wants you to achieve the goals that society has set for you. And then I just feel tired, like I'm running forever but never reaching the finish line. Megan looked at Nathan, clearly feeling the tension in every word he said. Nathan took a deep breath, then continued. No matter what, I never feel like it's enough. It's like I'm always chasing something, but never quite catching it. Megan stood silently beside him, deeply feeling the pain Nathan was carrying. She understood that social expectations, especially in a country like America, could become a huge pressure. Here, you don't just live for yourself, but also live to meet the standards that everyone expects. Megan, listening to Nathan's every word, felt like her heart was beating along with his. She looked at Nathan, those words shared as a message, a sigh from herself. Megan understood that not only Nathan but many people in this society had to face a life full of pressure. Megan took a deep breath, then looked at Nathan gently. I understand that feeling. Her voice was soft, but contained deep understanding. I used to feel the same way as you. Sometimes we live to please others, and then forget about ourselves. Where success is measured by the amount of money you make. She emphasized the word. Feel the complexity of this society, where sometimes even loved ones can become invisible pressure. Life in America can be a constant race, not only in work but also in relationships and social expectations. She continued, it feels like you always have to prove yourself, always have to achieve a certain standard that others set. But in the end, you will feel tired and empty. Nathan was silent, his eyes looking down at his teacup, as if thinking about what Megan had just said. He knew that she understood, that sometimes real conversations can calm the waves in our hearts. Do we only live to prove to others, sister? Voice was a little anxious, as if asking himself that question for a long time but not finding the answer. Megan smiled slightly, her eyes softer than ever. No, Nathan. Life is not about proving to others. It is about being true to yourself, even though in this society, that is sometimes very difficult. But you have to remember, no one can define your own worth. He paused for a moment, looking straight into Megan's eyes. Not for the expectations of others. We all have the right to choose how to live and decide what is most important. Nathan sat silently, his eyes dim as if Megan's words had touched a deep part of his soul, although the thoughts of the burdens in his heart still lingered. But after hearing Megan's words, he felt as if something had changed. A certain relief began to slowly fill the space in his heart. He turned to look at Megan, his eyes no longer filled with the anxiety they had before. Thank you. His voice was a little shaky, but also sincere. You don't know, your words made me feel a little lighter. I've always thought that I had to live the way people expected, to meet all the requirements set by society. But it seems I've forgotten that this life isn't just about pleasing others. Megan smiled. The warmth in her smile seemed to spread throughout the small kitchen. You don't have to thank me, Nathan. She just wanted him to understand that sometimes, being true to himself is the most important thing. And that's what makes life meaningful, even when you feel like you're lost in everything around you. Although he couldn't immediately find a solution to everything, at least he didn't feel alone in those thoughts. Nathan knew that he could share these things with Megan, someone who could understand and not judge him. You're right, maybe I've been so caught up in what others expected that I forgot that I also need to live for myself. But I really don't know where to start. Nathan shook his head, confusion appearing in his eyes again. Megan placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder, a gentle but comforting gesture. Don't worry too much. We all have a long way to go to understand ourselves. The important thing is that you realize that. And from there, you will begin to find your own path. The space in the kitchen seemed to flow more slowly after that conversation. The sound of rain outside the window was still steady, but now, Megan and Nathan no longer felt as heavy in their hearts as before. The words, though gentle but full of understanding, had created a safe space, where both could be themselves without fear of being judged. Megan poured more tea into Nathan's cup. Her eyes paused for a moment, looking at him as if to make sure everything was okay. The important thing is that every day, we dare to face ourselves. You don't have to rush, just live step by step, and then everything will gradually become clear. Nathan looked up at Megan. In his eyes now there was no longer confusion, but instead a new light. He nodded, feeling like there was a certain strength gradually rising within him, although he still couldn't clearly identify it, but at least he felt motivated to continue. You always know when to say something. Nathan smiled softly, a genuine smile, unlike the forced ones he had before. Megan just smiled back, saying nothing more, but her eyes expressed warmth and comfort. She understood that it didn't take much to help someone change. Sometimes just being a listener and sharing was enough. Everyone has their own journey, and sometimes that journey begins in quiet moments like this, when we stop to breathe, to reflect and accept that things aren't always easy, but we can choose how to face them. Megan stood there, gently observing Nathan as he sat silently, his cup of tea still warm in his hands. The kitchen was no longer the silent, tense space it had been at first. Instead, there was a sense of peace filling the space. Megan sensed the change in Nathan. Although he didn't say anything more, his eyes were brighter, less worried. Do you think I'll find my own path one day? Megan turned to look at him, her eyes filled with warmth. I believe you will. Sometimes we have to overcome intersections and challenges to realize our true path. And it is important to maintain perseverance. Nathan nodded, his eyes looking out the window, where the raindrops were still falling gently. He felt a change within himself, as if a certain part of his soul had awakened. That feeling is not a complete elimination of worries, but an acceptance that this life, even though it is complicated and full of challenges, we can still walk in our own way. We have to learn to see those opportunities, and sometimes those opportunities are not always obvious. Sometimes it takes time to see them. Nathan sighed, then turned back to Megan, making her feel the maturity that was slowly blossoming in him. I need to change the way I look at life, not just what I have to achieve, but what I can feel and live more freely. The rain had stopped long ago, gently as if time had stopped, allowing the two people in this room a moment to think about what had just been shared. Nathan was still sitting there, his hands tightly holding his cup of tea, but his eyes were no longer vague or uncertain as before. He felt something great rising inside him, a feeling he had never felt before. He turned back to Megan, his eyes filled with determination. You know, I am starting to feel more free. Freedom to accept what I really want to do. I think it's time for me to change. Nathan's voice was low and firm, no longer confused or anxious. Megan looked at him, not saying anything right away, but the smile on her lips was an affirmation that she felt proud of this change. She knew that sometimes, change doesn't come from big decisions, but from small moments, when we dare to face and accept ourselves. Yes, Megan replied softly. The important thing is that you have found a new path, a path that you really want to take, not for anyone else but for yourself. And to do that, sometimes we have to leave behind burdens, expectations that are not ours. Nathan nodded, the determination in his eyes growing stronger. I will start today. I will not let myself be caught up in the whirlwind of what others expect. I will find a way to do what I love, no matter how difficult or challenging it is. He stood up, picked up his cup of tea, and took a big sip, feeling a new life flow into his body. Megan watched him, and in his eyes she saw a maturity that he had never had before. A change not only in the way he thought, but also in the way he viewed life. You can do it, Megan said, her voice full of confidence. Remember, no matter how hard it gets, keep believing in yourself. As long as you know you're on the right path, everything will become easier. A week had passed since Nathan decided to change. The first few days were challenging, but he had already begun to feel the difference. Every morning when he woke up, he no longer felt anxious about other people's expectations, but instead felt a sense of freedom, as if he were living for himself, not to please someone else. However, despite his strong determination, he also knew that the road ahead was long and not easy. Megan was still a great companion, always encouraging and reminding him of why he started this journey. Their conversations continued regularly, as a source of motivation for Nathan not to lose his way during difficult days. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Nathan turned to Megan, the pensiveness still present in his eyes. Do you ever feel afraid of change? He asked, his voice gentle but carrying a hint of worry. Megan looked at him, her smile fading slightly, and then she said, Afraid? Of course. Every change brings a feeling of insecurity, because we never know what will happen next. But if we don't change, we will forever stand still, living in the molds that others have set for us. Nathan listened, feeling the truth in Megan's words. He smiled, not because he understood everything immediately, but because he felt like he was on the right track, even if he was still confused at times. So you're not afraid when you face difficulties? Nathan asked again, seemingly wanting to understand more about how Megan faced challenges. Megan shrugged, her eyes looking far away, as if remembering the days when she herself struggled with difficult decisions. It's not that I'm not afraid. Who isn't afraid when faced with something new, something strange? But I've learned one important thing, that if you don't try, you'll never know what you're capable of. And most importantly, sometimes mistakes are part of the journey. What's important is that you can get up and keep going. Nathan felt the sincerity in Megan's words. He no longer feels the pressure to get everything right immediately, but instead an acceptance that life doesn't always go according to plan. Congratulations on listening to the whole story. So you don't miss out, give us a like and comment below.